entirely. I'm so non-wasteful. I won't waste
Yeah.
anything, as a
Yeah.
result of being taught that by my mom.
Yeah, I'm the same. So it's exactly it. I ate the ice cream entirely, even though it was horrible and I wanted to throw it away, but I paid for it. Therefore, it was like that that sort of training that my mum gave me. That you're gonna get it down, yeah, is what I did. So yeah, no bueno, man. Bad for your
No,
health,
yeah,
bad
yeah,
for
yeah.
your health.
Finish everything that's on your plate. That's what people like. Yeah, our parents. Well, I don't know about your parents. My parents certainly born in 1947, straight after the war, and they were taught you eat everything on your plate because their parents were during the war and you didn't have enough. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I think it's just generally our generation. Our generation have been raised by parents that knew privation, essentially. And yeah, been trained that way. So there we go. Folks, do you finish your plate? Do you waste your food? Do you, if you buy something you don't like, do you leave it? Or do you kind of just scoff it down anyway because you've paid money for it? Let me know in the comments, man, because this is a cultural behavior we need to examine. Anyway, welcome everybody to Brainfood Live on Air, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. It is episode 312, 312 episodes we've been doing. Someone asked me the other day, the week actually, yesterday, say, Hung, have you ever missed the Brainfood Live? And I was thinking, you know what, I might not have done. It's been going every week, apart from maybe a few outages, maybe 2 or 3 outages where literally the electricity's gone off. And there may have been like the odd Good Friday and stuff, where we've just like not done it that week because of the Good Friday. Anyway, great to have you all here. Friends, just wanted to make sure you can hear me okay. I think basically by people saying and responding to my question, they can hear me fine here on Crowdcast. We are broadcasting this obviously on LinkedIn as well. So if you're watching this on my LinkedIn, do let me know in the comments whether the audio is fine. I do believe we're also broadcasting this on Rob's LinkedIn. I think Adam's doing as well, a couple of other people. So if you're watching it on any of those LinkedIns, folks, just do a quick sound check, audio check. Can you hear and see me okay? Okay, good stuff. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate you letting me know. Folks, before we kick off into the conversation, of course, we have to thank our sponsors for this show. Every week, an organization comes in and says, you know what, we want to keep this conversation going. Very important. The dialogue continues in our industry to make sure we're sharing information and connecting our peers together. This week is, of course, one of the, if not the kind of most appealing and cool type of ATSs out there in the market. It is Ashby, of course. I don't know of a single company that's looking to upgrade an ATS where this company is not mentioned as amongst one of those options. So they're obviously doing something very right. They're constantly rolling out with new product features as well, which are very impressive. I do believe they're starting to do things like automated note taking and stuff like this, which is coming into having a full service AI enabled type of experience for recruiters. So if you are in the market looking to upgrade your ATS, I do believe Ashby needs to be a business you should demo. I think that's pretty clear. All right, I've shared the link into the chat stream there. Do check it out. All right, Adam Gordon, good to see you as ever. I think your shirt is definitely whiter than mine. It tells me that there's a limit to how many times you can wash a white shirt, isn't it? You just need to just turf them after a couple of washes, I believe.
yeah, but you're like Barack Obama and like Elizabeth Holmes in that you wear a uniform, right? So you wear the same clothes every day, and so that you don't
Okay.
have to think about it in the morning, right? You're like Steve Jobs.
Uh,
So but
on
you should
Brainfood
turn
Live,
over your
yes.
shirts a bit more often there.
Yeah, I've just noticed how yellow this shirt is. It's not meant to be this color. I'll just have to call it cream or something. Anyway, Adam, good to see you. Why don't we quickly review the newsletter before we get on with the show? What was your thoughts on last week? Anything interesting in particular you want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, loads of great stuff in there. Hard to pin down the specific things I want to focus on, but I did enjoy the article, which is about the comparison between generative AI and polyester. So back in the
Mm,
20th
love
century,
this.
the invention of polyester really revolutionized the textile industry in that everybody started being able to mass produce like everything from, you know, jackets and trousers and kilts and whatever you want. You could get polyester, absolutely everything. Until there was a backlash and people realized that it was kind of tacky and actually it wasn't very good quality. It was cheap and nasty, and people stopped using it. So they had to completely revert the sort of process and go to more of a selective use of polyester and mixed polyester with other things as well. A couple of days ago, somebody messaged me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, look, do you think that you guys could build a solution which will turn raw CVs into beautiful, like formatted, branded CVs for internal use?" And I said, "We're not going to do that, but why do you ask?" He said, "Because I've been trying so damn hard to get ChatGPT to do this, and it doesn't work." And I'm like, "Well, no, it doesn't work because," and likewise, people are finding that ChatGPT is not very good for building your interview questions and your job adverts and your job descriptions because it's just too basic. And that's the comparison. The comparison is everyone's gone, wow, generative AI, just like they went wow to polyester. But the realization now is that there needs to be a slightly different approach. Still a wonderful, wonderful invention, but there is the mass adoption needs to have a bit more nuance and sophistication. You're on mute. I'm sure it was great what you were saying.
It was, yeah. I was about to say there's a cool factor as well with when it comes to polyester. I'm sure, like once it becomes ubiquitous, that's when it loses its cachet, and it's like, oh right, it's not particularly special. And I believe that's going to happen with Gen AI content. So think about all of the magic that was there. I remember, was it 2 or 3 years ago, was when I first discovered some sort of AI generated thing, and I tweeted out, I think it was Instagram, like 10 images of hung with these like bizarre generations, and everyone's like going, "Wow, I can't believe it." Now, if I did the same, it's like, yeah, what else? So it becomes like very old very quickly. And as everyone's got the capability of using it, everyone's got the capability, and everyone is doing it, it becomes like very, very commodified. And such, people will end up looking for that more artisanal experience. So Gen AI is our polyester, folks. It's a really interesting philosophical take. I thought it's relevant for us in terms of engagement, marketing, content marketing, and all the rest of it. So I've shared the link in the chat stream. Have a look.
All right. Martin Burns wrote an interesting article about RPO and how it needs to evolve. I think he's done some study into this subject. I think the headline was, "It's not dying, it's evolving." Are people saying that it's dying? I don't know. I've not heard that particularly, but anyway, it kind of reinforces it's not dying, it's evolving. But there needs to be a real value towards more of a strategic impact. So RPOs are needing to do a lot more blending, both filling the jobs, but adding a lot of additional value like talent intelligence, DEI insights, workforce planning, that type of thing. AI and automation is really reshaping delivery. So going are the days when you just hire 100 people in a cheaper location and they do the job that you were previously doing in your more expensive location. And they're really very, very deeply investing and focusing in. And this is why I personally love RPO, because I think they're generally ahead of the curve on technology.
I think so.
There's an agglomeration effect, isn't there? Because there's like so many people who are smart and they're all focused on solving the same problem, and they're working with 500 organizations on their talent acquisition challenges rather than one internal team. Of course, an internal team can still be brilliant. I'm not suggesting they can't, but RPOs typically they're getting to great answers more quickly.
Yeah.
So there's a blurring line between RPO and in-house as well. They and customers are not just looking for that sort of, right, okay, we need you to fill those 1,000 jobs every year. It's all blurring, and it's all evolving, and I'm here for it, and I'm excited about it.
I've got two takes with RPO. By the way, Martin Burns, definitely worth following him. I'm pleased that he's been very, active on LinkedIn. Generally, he's a great writer. So, we need more voices like him. So go and follow him on LinkedIn. A really interesting post. What are your thoughts on RPO, folks? I've got two narratives on RPO. I think one is like yours, very positive, because I think they are early adopters in our sector when it comes to technology. I think they can bring in information from the wider market with internal sort of TA may, be locked a little bit in their own sort of company, not be able to see what's on the outside. They can potentially be a very interesting consultancy type service, which is not just bums on seats, but be able to provide advice in terms of, do you even need a bum on a seat? Maybe it's an agent force that you need. So we're seeing a bit of that from some of the RPOs out there. I saw yesterday in the CIPD, Hudson RPO in particular. However, there's also a negative take, and the negative take is there may be like a big data privacy problem now when it comes to how you operate with RPO. Like the all value of an RPO is, you know what, we're going to embed this person into your team. It's going to just work seamlessly. They're going to use all of your tools. It's going to be this, and that. Now I'm thinking, all right, that's going to be like, it's not clear how that works with AI anymore because are they going to bring their own tech into your business? That probably they can't do that. Or are you going to then let them use your tech? I mean, is that something you can do? Who owns the IP? Who owns the liability? I think all of those questions are, for me, a little bit confused. So I think there's a negative and positive image as to where RPO is. I'd love to know what your thoughts are, folks. Are you a bull or a bear when it comes to the RPO market? Let me know in the comments. We probably should do an RPO show at some point. All right, give us one more before we get into this, Adam.
Right. Okay. One more. Signal Fire, which is an organization I'd never heard of. They did a state of talent report for like AI data science talent, really. And one of the things that they said was that entry level hiring is collapsing in big
Yeah.
tech and startups. They've cut new grad hiring by 50%, roughly 50% since 2019. So AI budget cuts have meant fewer junior roles. Of course, I wonder what the impact of this is in 5 years' time when there's not as many people coming through. Anyway, the top AI labs are really winning the, let's call it, war for talent. I know people hate that phrase, but I quite like it. AI, like the big AI labs are really winning that war. Anthropic is interestingly outcompeting OpenAI and DeepMind. A couple of potential reasons why are retention strongest where engineers have got more autonomy, they've got more product clarity, more clarity around vision, that type of thing. The concentration of AI hiring is really intensified, actually. So the places like Austin and other what have been described as Zoom towns. So it's the ones where there's been a big rise in tech hiring over the last few years, but they're expected to be in San Francisco maybe a day a week or whatever it might be. That's really been losing steam, and the centralization back to New York City, but much more so San Francisco and the Bay Area has really intensified. As you'd expect, AI engineers are commanding big premiums, but talent supply is also really crowded, and the average AI engineer job's getting between 90 and 250 applicants. So there's a lot going on in that space. I'd love to be a fly on the wall, actually, in somewhere like Anthropic or one of these companies. Windsurf.
Yeah, I mean, there's more news to come. I mean, crazy talk about 10-figure salaries and stuff. That's crazy for an employee, man. That's absolutely insane. But the war for talent is, I think, a legitimately we've got to rehabilitate it. I mean, in terms of where we're at with that elite AI talent. Absolutely, it is high conflict. You're literally it's competing over existing talent, working for your competitors. That's exactly what's happening right now. So, very interesting post by Signal Fire, worth checking in. By the way, I know it's all US Silicon Valley focused, and we want to be careful to moderate sort of how much that is representative of the wider recruitment market in general. But I think the chopping down of the graduate entry, I think, is definitely a factor. That is a problem going down the pipe. Everyone I'm speaking to is saying absolutely graduate hiring, entry level hiring is getting hammered. And yes, certain high demand functions remain hugely high demand. But they're all like hyper focused on this artificial intelligence. So it is the dominant fact of our age. All right, cool. Let's get on with the show. Adam Gordon, now I definitely know you know nothing about this because you've never led a global TA team. You've never done it, mate. You've led a team that's distributed, so you've got something to offer. So maybe you can offer that. Have you ever managed anybody outside of the UK? I mean, there's a start.
Actually, I'm not sure I have managed anybody outside the UK. I've managed like outsourced teams outside the UK, but not actual employees. I don't think so. But I think I
Yeah.
do have a bit to add about this because I've got lots of customers who are international companies, and we're working with them every day to help them with their international collaboration programs. So I always have to do this, defend my own ability to speak on a subject. Anyway, Adam Gordon, you
Oh,
know
Matt.
absolutely nothing. I know you know nothing about recruitment enablement, but you're on your anyway.
You're on here. You're on here as a primary stooge. No, you're not. But you've got loads to offer exactly this on querying our guests that do know something about it. Because in fact, that's what they're doing for a living. So let's bring our guests on. We've been holding them in the wings way too long, and we'll see how they get on. Harpreet, by the way, is having some tech problems, but we'll see whether we can resolve that and get Harps on as well. Let me see if that's happening. There is a Harpreet here. Let's try this. And we'll see whether we're good. There should be a pop-up, by the way, Jen, Sandy, and Harpreet. Just accept that. Make sure you click a mic available, etc. When you do that, and we should be good. For the audience, sort of, what are your thoughts on sort of, managing a global TA team? What are the challenges? What are the difficulties? Have you got experience in it? I'd love to get your take. I mean, is it actually just the same? Is it different? And if so, what are the things we need to know about that difference? Okay, we seem to have people coming on, which is great. Okay, we have Harpreet here. Harpreet, wonderful to see you. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself, Harpreet? Who are you? What it is you do?
Hey, hi Hank. Hi Adam. Hi Sandy. I see you on the screen as well. I'm Harpreet. I am a director for talent acquisition at Adobe, and I lead up university and executive recruiting for Adobe India right now. But in a lot of previous avatars, I've led sort of multi-region teams as well. So happy to be here today.
Fantastic. Great to see you here, Harpreet. We have Sandy Gruel here as well. Sandy, wonderful to see you. A long time no see. Firstly, introduce yourself. Who are you? What it is you do, Sandy?
Yeah, amazing. And thank you for having me after all of this time, Hung. It's been a long time coming. Yes, I'm Sandy Gruel. What do I do or what have I done? I have led global TA functions, mainly across the media, betting, sports, tech sectors, most recently with DAZN, and now supporting Canby as HR transformation, which is all things related to people and talent. I have built and scaled teams globally across Europe, Middle East, Asia, but mostly passionate about aligning that TA strategy with the commercial growth while still trying to make it human.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. I've just shared the links with to both Harpreet and Sandy in the chat stream there. So go ahead and connect with those two. You're going to learn a lot. Jenny Candy's going to come and join us when she can. Jenny, I've just invited you. Let me know whether there's... Oh, you're having some trouble. Circle of no ending death. That's no good. Let me uninvite you and see whether we can re-invite. Yeah, I wonder whether it might be a case. It could be a caching issue, or maybe you got to use a different browser. Give it a shot, Jennifer. Let me know how it goes. Okay, invited again. But let's get on with the show. Leadership lessons in global TA. I've come to this with a presumption that there is like interesting and notable differences between leading a global team versus, let's say, a national team. And I'm talking about cultural differences. I'm talking about hiring practices can be different. I'm talking about legislation is different, communication styles, time zones, all that type of stuff. So I guess a quick question to everyone here. What would you say has been the primary would be the primary difference between managing a national team versus a global one? Have you got anything that immediately pops in your mind when I ask that question?
I'm happy to jump in if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think of the two, it's definitely key to move from the doing to then orchestrating. In a national role, you're closer to the execution. You need to be more hands-on versus in a global role, you have to then try to incorporate orchestration in terms of scaling those frameworks. You're dealing with multiple complexities like time zones and some of the things you've already mentioned. So it's about balancing consistency with those cultural nuances. and influencing without trying to directly control those things, right? So for me, I think it's influence through alignment with local people teams, with local hiring managers, with the processes and the tools instead of direct instructions. And I think, you know, if you go down the instruction route, you're going to bash heads, right? And so I think there's a real key part there, which is around stakeholder engagement and collaboration to try and understand what they are, before you can then try to stabilize any process. Is where the impact will come.
No, really, really good. So the first thing to know there is, I love that initial idea, the distance from the execution. So that there may be a simple distance, because if you're a national leader, you're going to be closer to the business and probably more, you know, you're right there with the operational stuff. So this is happening. Whereas if you're global, it necessarily you're physically different. You're going to be further away. So your own role is going to be different from this. Harpreet, what are your thoughts? What's been the biggest difference between working in a national role and a global role for you?
Yeah, just on a lighter note, Hung, I read what Caroline has written on the chat bar. Holiday practices took me by surprise when I did a role which was beyond, just my region. But I think cultural nuances sort of are the biggest element, because they impact the way you interact with people. They impact the way processes can differ, and they impact the way legislations come into the picture. So I think cultural diversity and variances is the most significant. And it can start with as little as, how do you even take your rec intake meeting? How do you even get prepared for that, right? Then how do you sort of approach candidates, like, in India, whilst it's absolutely okay for us to pick up the phone and talk to somebody and even do a cold call, it might not necessarily be so in, say, the Middle East region, say specifically Israel or Egypt, right? And you would need to sort of block time, take permissions, right? So it's very different. And I think uh, largely understanding people is what one should start with. The process part of it, the legislation part of it, is going to be a daily discovery. But I think trying to give yourself time to understand the people nuances is really, really the one that sort of stands up, distinct from doing a national role versus doing a more global role.
Yeah, really important point. I want to go straight to something that's bugging me straight away on this. On reporting and KPIs.
Yeah.
Because I think part of the reason why people want a global role, like the business wants a global role, probably because they don't want to interface with every local manager, and they want to just speak to one global person. You're the person that tells me everything about TA in my business, my global business. So you're pressured basically to give information from the business and, benchmarks, comparisons, and so on. However, if there's local nuances that are very different in terms of just how people want to communicate, then is it even possible to have like standardized benchmarks on that? So for instance, let's say in India, as you mentioned, Harpreet, it's much more real-time calibration, much more on the phone, text, whatnot, far less about scheduling stuff in diary. But if I know some TA leaders that actually look at the diary as a KPI, like how many meetings have you got blocked in there and that type of stuff. So is it even possible to do like a global benching across the group, or do we have to be realistic and say, every team we've got to have a different set of KPIs because we have to recognize local culture? What are your thoughts on this? Harpreet, go with you first, and then we go with Sandy on her input.
Sure. I think, Hung, it's possible. Having lived and worked with 3 US multinationals, I think it is possible. The complexities sort of start emerging, but I think it is possible. I think what is useful is to have some core KPIs which are across the board. So, for example, I would want to believe all organizations, all recruiters, all hiring managers strive for candidate experience. The elements of that candidate experience can vary country by country, but ultimately at the heart of it, I would want everybody who's interviewing at Adobe right now to have a great candidate experience. So you can have some core KPIs, and then you can have some contextual KPIs as well, which are sort of specific and relevant to your country, right? For example, if you're striving for, say, internal mobility and you're looking for internal talent development as well, now that could vary country by country as well, right? So I think it is possible, though the core KPIs of can be different from contextual KPIs. Another example is around time to fill, right? Or time to offer accept, right? Now, time to fill in India versus anywhere else would be very, very different. I mean, we have the fun notice period clause in India, right? Whereas most other countries possibly do not have that, and you just need to wait for the BGV and you can be onboarded. So I think time to fill in that context is useful for a global business leader to be aware of, right? But if you just look at absolute data, you might feel that a particular region is not doing as well as others, right? So I think contextual KPIs make all the difference, and I think if communicated and agreed well in advance, very possible to manage.
It's a very necessary term, contextual KPIs, because it is the case that hiring in different territories is going to take different amount of time. And we all know that, particularly in the US, everyone's at will contracts. Therefore, the notice periods, actually, there's very minimal notice periods. Therefore, you should be able to recruit faster. Whereas countries where there's like extended notice periods, or notice periods that are actually timed or locked to a schedule, I think Poland does this. I think essentially Polish people, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what happens if you resign, it's like you just go to the end of your next month or something. So it's not only the month, but so let's say you resign in June, your month notice starts 1st of July, so that you can only possibly start on the 1st of August. So all of that then impacts, when this person is going to start for your business. It's pretty clear. So contextual KPIs, that's hugely complex, isn't it, Sandy? I mean, that sounds like that's going to dominate all your time. Is that even practically feasible?
Definitely. And Harpreet, I would literally, it feels like you've just taken the same paragraph I was going to say, because the only additional thing I'd add, especially having covered the Indian market, is, the ball changes completely, because we don't even have the opportunity to look at or focus so much on time to fill. Is that candidate going to show up on that day? And historically, candidates will often take 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 positions, offers, and then decide the day before which one they're going to take. So to your point, absolutely use those core global KPIs. So time to hire, quality of hire, etc. Great, but always contextualize. So I think for us, one region, it might be a win to do it in 30 days. In others, it's a red flag. So I think I've probably used methodologies around segmenting data by regions and role type and funnel stage. And again, it's, who are you reporting this data to? Success is not just about numbers, it's about how the process health, again, Harpreet, the things that you described, which then shows the amount of effort TA have put in. And as a leader, how you enable them. Yes, I know you love that, Adam. Enable TA to be able to present that data to back up what the state of play is for those recruitment drives. So yeah, it's definitely dashboards should be region filterable with narrative layer is my take on this.
What's the state of the ATS sort of the products to help people do that? Are they actually designed for global sort of contextualization of KPIs like this? Because it seems to me that most ATS is just presumed as like one territory, and the reporting is going to just default to one thing, and it's like that's going to be very tricky to deal with. Adam, I think you it seems as if you're desperate to say something. So do you have a thought on this?
No, sorry, you misread my body language there, and I have no comments on that particular issue, other than, of course, the more globally enabled the applicant tracking system, likely to be the ones with the less features that talent acquisition teams actually really want. So, of course, the ones that come with other ERP systems or other HRIS systems have probably got the best global, capabilities, and I'm talking about Workday and SuccessFactors and Oracle, but they're not necessarily the ones that are so feature rich as the likes of an iCIMS or a Smart Recruiters.
Yeah, just jumping in there, Hung. I think this is where integration with your HRIS becomes amazing and pivotal in being able to track people that are no-shows, for the example I described. But I know that's not always possible with some ATSs or HR systems, but that's always been an additional support to try and get those metrics.
Very interesting. Okay, what are the reason? So I guess global TA leader, one of the reasons is basically simplification of the reporting line and giving sort of a method for the C-level to better understand what's happening, state of play with TA. What are the reasons might someone kind of create this role of global TA? Are there any other things that sort of like, Sandy, let's go to you on this actually. When you've taken an opportunity like that, what was your brief? Like, what was the objective you were given?
Brief? What do you mean brief? There was just a target, a deadline, and some numbers. But let's focus on, I think the way I can answer that is thinking about what are the expectations from C-level. It's speed, it's quality, and cost, right? Which is, if possible, and again, I'll always keep drawing to this, the collaboration with working with our HR teams is being able to then measure the business impact. So for me, it's very much aligning the workforce plan with the wider business targets, margin targets, and market launches. And I think those are the key drivers that have then helped me as a leader think about a strategy to execute against that. So it's literally breaking it down, whether it was location strategy, if it was D&I, or if it was workforce. I think, speed, quality, and cost are table stakes. Hey, Jen.
Really, really good.
Hi, I'm on the phone. I mean, it's a good test of corporate and global, because I've seemed to have this issue with any global company I've worked with, where we have such stringent firewalls that you can't get into anything. So
your phone works good though. This sounds good.
Good.
It sounds good. And I tell you what, the eyewear is even better, Jen. Look at those spectacular specs. They're fantastic. Jennifer, wonderful to see you. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure. Jennifer Candy. So I've been working in global roles for the past 19 years. So 19 of my 25 plus. So I know global more than I know regional or other or local. I'm right now a management consultant at IMI PLC, which is a global engineering organization headquartered in Birmingham, and working through their global head of TA transformation.
Let's start with the transformation, Jen. Stick with you for a second. What needs to be transformed? I'm curious as to why these roles exist. Like, presumably, there's something that the business wants, and they thought, right, let's do this. Or is it the case they just get the person in, and the person comes in to make the assessment as to what's required, and you then do the transformation? How did it work in your latest circumstance, Jen?
I think, I've done a couple of these, and they're all a bit different. I think, look, the organization always has an idea of what they think they want. And what they think they need. And typically it's about cost savings, right? Is the first main driver. And then up to me to show them that actually it's about more than that. It's the bigger holistic picture. In this particular situation, it was just that. It was more cost savings. That whilst the company's been around since the 1800s, they don't have a global TA team. Dedicated TA team. So it's been very much like you would have seen maybe in the mid 2000s, something like I had at SAB Miller. So it is very much how do we bring this more firmly in-house, and developing that full business case with all the 5 different sectors. They've gone from 29 divisions to 5 sectors. And it very much, when I say the 5 sectors, it very much is about those sectors being almost like their own companies. So it very much is a business case to 5 different, sector presidents and global sector HR leads as well. So it's a very matrix environment like most that I'm in, and navigating that is, I mean, one of the keys to global.
Navigating all the stakeholders, I think we'll definitely go back into that, because that's a skill set that is underrated, and probably one of these that we don't actually ever properly quantify. Your ability to kind of work within a complex set of relationships. Like, I've never seen that as a bullet point, really. We've kind of just inferred it from someone's experience. So it'd be interesting to figure out what that sort of trait or skill is. Let's look at it in a different way, everyone. So when you decide to pull everything into a centralized system, centralized TA versus the decentralized sort of recruitment, what drives that decision? Is one better than the other inherently, or is there certain local circumstances which make one better than the other? What is the impact on things like artificial intelligence on what makes a better a structure mode of operations? Do you have any thoughts on that? And again, open to anyone to volunteer some thoughts.
I mean, I have thoughts, but I wanted to give people a chance to talk.
No, just pipe up.
You know me, I always have thoughts. So I'll just shut up, and if somebody doesn't say something, I'll talk. But look, I think we're going through a bit of a change right now, at least what I'm seeing, from back in the day, everybody doing what I'd call a more traditional centralized model, right? To one that is bringing up more of the importance of functions or specializations. So I think it's how can we get that level of expertise globally within the TA teams? So I'm starting to see more of a change to having global TA teams segmented around, say, digital technology and data, right? Or a global TA team for engineering specifically. And then bringing those all together under that, global head of TA. And look, I don't think there's any, when people say best practices, I mean, there's no necessarily right or wrong to your structure. It has to be what is suitable and what works for that organization. So first and foremost, I'd go in and take a look at how is organization structured now? What is it that they're trying to achieve in terms of that structure as well? Why are they structured like that? And what are the overarching strategic initiatives and goals that we need to lean into? And then how are others structured to be able to support them in the best possible way? And if I go back to the IMI scenario, for example, first and foremost, I wanted everything to kind of centralize, go in your traditional regional structure. Do we do that? I hemmed and hawed about different things. And I'm going in with more of a sector specific. So having a global TA sector manager for each of the different sectors, and some double hatting on sectors where the sector was a bit smaller. And then them reporting into a global sector HR lead and matrixing to the global head of TA. So different than I probably would have proposed in the past. But I think what is going to be needed for this particular organization to enable it to be successful and drive the strategy.
Go ahead, Harpreet. I think go ahead.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways to look at it from the traditional models of talent acquisition versus what they've evolved into now, right? So if you think about decision-making attributes, like what do you need to make a decision, right? And if you then break it down. So for instance, like any great recruiter would want to be in an advisory role to the hiring manager or to the business leader, right? And what could be elements of that of that, right? So can we consider centralizing or consolidating market intelligence and insights? Because a lot of that is secondary research, is a lot of internet driven research, or you're asking questions to an AI, consolidating reports, bringing it out in consumable formats, right? So can you consider that to be consolidated? Can you consider first level core KPI reporting to be consolidated? The contextualization can happen in region, but can you look at consolidating data and reporting of performance, of your charter, in a consolidated fashion? there's a lot of conversations around talent communities, pipeline generation, and much like a sales function, the lead generation concept, right? So when you're building talent communities, you first want to know what's the lay of the land. You want to have early cursory conversations with candidates, do like a dipstick on their interest, etc. Can you consider consolidating those from like a particular region or an area, right? So I think there are ways and means of how do you consolidate and what do you consolidate. But what stays sort of in region, local, and has a high touch is always going to be more customer advisory, more front facing with the business, more direct communications with the candidates. So I think those roles possibly will need to stay non-consolidated, centralized. But the others, there are sort of opportunities. For example, even talent marketing. If I think about it, your brand, your messaging, what you want to tell a candidate at the Uber level can stay pretty similar. So that look and feel, the way you talk about your organization or the way you even tell about an organization can possibly be similar, and then the role in region can vary, right? So those elements can be consolidated. But I think what is more direct communication, more direct contact with either a business leader or with a candidate needs to be more localized.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. You've got to balance that sort of centralization of skill set, and obviously the efficiencies you gain from there. And of course, these days with things like the innovation we're seeing in artificial intelligence, that it lends itself a lot more to providing that sort of centralized service. But when you're speaking to candidates and actually engaging with those folks, it seems to me that pretty obvious that person on the ground is going to be just a superior option for lots of reasons, for communication style, for local nuance, local knowledge of local legislation. You can't expect, recruiters to know the employment law across, however many different countries. So native sort of recruiters in clustering in places where they need to be. And I guess that applies to sectoral specificity as well, doesn't it? It's like, you want someone who basically has credibility with the people that you're recruiting for. As close as you can get
do that
in terms
first,
of their
right? So you have that lens of, so just to be clear, when I was saying, like, we do say global for the sector, they're not all sat in one location. Right? So you've got a globally dispersed team, that there's an art and a science to all of this. You need to understand, where is the hiring coming from? Where are the jurisdictions that are very challenging to hire from, or where they need the local language and culture and need to be closer to the ground? And then determine where do we prioritize and start hiring those in those specific areas. So it's a very geographically dispersed team, but all focused on hiring for one specific sector, if that makes sense. So you're getting that global, and the global piece is aligning to all of those fundamental frameworks, ways of working, but then at a local level, understanding exactly what you can localize, right? Knowing what needs to be localized. Legalities is an obvious, right? That's just a no-brainer. You have to do that. But there's a nice to have and a want to have for a lot of people at the local level, and that's where it gets challenging, but really trying to help them to understand why it's helpful to have certain things at economies of scale and what you gain from that, and where there's a bit of give and take, but then equally how can they have some freedom within the framework to make sure that they're meeting the needs of their local customers and clients.
I was just going to jump in there too, Hung. Is that right?
Yeah, of course. Just say.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, I think, the businesses I've worked for, I feel like they have tried to route towards centralized, right? And it hasn't completely worked, or it hasn't been completely successful for all of the reasons we've talked about today, like cost effective, language capability, and culturally awareness, including the compliance and legal elements. And so I definitely think hybrid models are the way forward. So there's some core functions that I think work well as being centralized, like systems, data, and the branding team. Although I'm starting to see a shift in that also being localized, but I think the delivery will always stay distributed. So I have like a model of maybe, I don't know, 80-20, where 80% is global and then 20% is localized. So they could be things like the job adverts, and as we keep mentioning, compliance steps, but you just need to flex it where it affects the candidate's experience and onboarding, because then that all plays a bigger part into the business process, and providing a good service. So I think it's definitely hybrid, and I think we just got to really focus on balancing all of the must-haves versus, the must-haves from a global, this is how TA should operate, versus actually what are the local nuances that are going to make this TA team successful and ultimately meet the business demand. So it's a balance of efficiency and relevance, I would say.
Yeah, really good. A couple of questions on cross-cultural differences. Do we try and universalize kind of a TA culture across the company and say, you know what, like for example, let's say Adobe, famous company, you say, hey, Adobe recruits like this, and then you have a bunch of things that, hey, everyone in Adobe, if you work in recruiting, you adopt this approach, and then roll that across. Or do you accept, actually, you know what, that's not going to work in certain territories, therefore it's actually a mistake to try and universalize. We've got to just have like respect for local practices and not try and like push one set across the piece. I've mentioned Adobe Harpreet, not to necessarily invite you to speak specifically on it, but it was the brand just on my mind right there. So maybe you would want to comment a little bit on that idea. Like, how do you do this? Is it even worth trying to do a universalized like cultural way of doing it?
I think, I mean, not just at Adobe, but even in my earlier organizations at Microsoft and Hewlett Packard, I think there is, of course, a way of working that is sort of, communicated and articulated globally. So we have a hiring at Adobe process. Microsoft also had their version, and so did HP, right? But I think there is a lot of liberty and freedom to sort of blend it to the ways of working in country as well. So while at the heart of it, you know what you're doing, so your process part of it stays pretty similar across the board. Your intent to attract top talent stays pretty similar across the board. Your interview guidelines stay pretty similar across the board. How you assess is in at Adobe, for instance, our core is obviously and always going to be our 4 core values, right? But then you sort of align, like what could be being genuine could possibly mean similar across the globe, but owning the outcome in regions could be different than what it could be maybe in another country, right? So I think most organizations, large setups, would have like a global way of working, like your North Star, your anchor points that you need to run after, right? But I think there is a lot of liberty and freedom to sort of, blend it into what will make it happen, because at the heart of every talent acquisition professional is only working to get the best talent to your organization. So I think there you get a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Okay, noticing sort of where we're at time, I want to get to the point where we're talking about like mistakes that people typically make stepping into a global TA role for the first time. Everyone starts, I guess, from a national role, right? I mean, you're not born into it. You do a national role, I guess you get promoted in. What would you say are things that you've got to bear in mind in order to, give it a good success? Any thoughts on this? Sandy, let's go to you on this. I think, because not saying, the current situation, but you started just a new job recently, I believe, right? Only a couple months or so ago. So what have you learned in that sort of flow in that last couple of months? You thought, you know what, this has really set me in good stead to be a success here.
Yeah, no, great, thanks. And I'm actually contracting at Canby, which is fantastic, because it feels like I'm perceived as coming into action and support with some pivotal tasks and really some important business projects that Canby are operating. But I have learned, and I'm continuing to learn. I'm currently working with lots of different types of, let's say, business functions, which are then having a different set of problems. So for me, depending on the country, and I think wherever it is, whichever the region is, I think understanding the friction over that standardization versus autonomy is going to shoot you in the foot, like if you don't act on it. So I think it's really important to process design, to build ownership, but from the point of involving the people that it is part of their, their remit. And I think, for instance, local hiring managers, there's almost a fear of losing control or speed. And I think I've had personally, not at Canby, in various different roles, had pushback on me trying to come in and have some quick wins versus doing things iteratively, those standardized tools or global SLAs. And I think it's the key part of that success, wherever you go, is listening, educating on the why, and the co-designing solutions. We all know one size doesn't fit all. So it's not about enforcing, it's about alignment of what does this business function need in this location and why, and how can we, get TA to support. So for me, it's a combination of working collaboratively, but also being able to influence the why. Why do we need to change? And whether you bring the data to the table to back that up. But it is definitely been a success for me to take that approach.
Yeah, really good.
I'd like to
go on, Ed.
I'd like to ask a question about recruiting talent acquisition people globally. Like, where has it been easy to hire people? Where has it been harder to hire people? And what are the themes that you've had through your experiences in that?
If the question was for me, Adam, I think the TA talent exists. It's about budget. So, for me, I've, again, going, sorry, dogs in the background, how inconvenient. It's about being able to meet the demands of the business. So on one hand, yes, we want top talent, but actually, can we afford it? And this, again, my argument will always be, is it coachable versus critical? So I think the budget part of it has been the challenge. The talent exists. I've recruited in most countries, and also, you talked earlier about entry level roles. I think recruitment is also transferable. Whilst I'm a huge ambassador of having that senior TA partner or TA specialist within my org structure, this is something that can be trained and taught, which then just amplifies salary. So I think there's a combination of what you are offering as a leader to people, and the potential. But I haven't really faced challenges finding the talent. It's been able to afford them with cost savings, which we're all very familiar with around the business.
Yeah, I tend to find the most difficult is in the traditionally lower cost locations where you're setting up shared service centers, or you've come in and you're looking for solid talent in those same areas, and everybody else is looking for the same talent in the same areas. And everybody wants the low cost talent, right? So there's a balance, right, between what you can get, what you want, and making sure that they're going to be in the right locations to serve the business. So it is a bit of a toss up. I always cost out talent across different locations, but then equally share with the business and come with data around what's your potential of finding good talent in there and what is an example of what that looks like. So they know before they're making a decision on geographical what we're talking about. And I guess coming back to that prior point that Sandy was just speaking on as well, look, we've got to, I think it's just the flexibility and the complexity and the patience that you need, and how the learnings that you have, how you come about tackling something. My way has changed, I would expect, over 19 years. I was young and I'm sure very blunt around what I thought was right. And I was probably right. But the way in which I've gone about things has changed completely. Knowing when is the right time and the readiness of the organization to chew on something, to absorb something, or are they sitting, 3 to 5 years away and they need these certain steps to get there? How you influence, and that takes a very long time, right? I would say, global roles aren't for the faint-hearted. It's not all bells and whistles and fun and games. It's very late hours. You're working both sides of the spectrum. At Cargill, I didn't shut down before 11:30, I think more than a couple times in 3 years, and that's 11:30 p.m. I mean, it's not like that's in every company, right? But these are expectations that you just need to have going in and accept, how is that going to work? And you do have some flexibility, but how is that going to work with my standard of life? But how do you bring them along the journey with you? How do you set the stage? And how do you go about meeting their concerns? Because they'll always have concerns or challenges. How do you go about meeting those with absolute unemotive, let's say, unemotive data? Right. I'm always going to be, I'm a passionate person. I very much care a lot about getting things through, but I've loved kind of being on the consulting side now and taking that consulting arm to say, here's the brass tacks, here's your concerns, here's something we can do, here's what we can flex, you want that, might not recommend it, but if we're going to go that direction, here's how we could do that. Here's another option, so always coming in with a level of, how do I meet them where they are, truly understanding what their concerns are, because there might be a misunderstanding there as well. Coming back with as much data as you have, and sometimes you don't have as much as you'd like to be able to counteract it. And having, I think my last part would be having the long game in mind. When you're in recruitment, we tend to love the highs and lows. At least I do. I quite liked it for my sentence. You've got the highs of something great, and then yes, there's very much the lows as well. But it really kept you on your toes. When you're in a global role, you've got to have the long term in mind, right? Your quick wins will be, or they were not even quick, but your wins or highs will be, oh God, I had that horrific call with that president, finally got him over the line on something. And that's a big win for you. I'm like, I'll live on that for like 3 months, right? But actually, when you see things go in, you're looking 18 months to put something in, 2 years, 3 years to actually see it work its way through and get the ROI from it. So it's only, for example, at Cargill, 3 years in, I looked back at my strategy that I'd put forward and I went, I did it. Every single one, right? So it was shocking, but you never feel like it as you're going through. You don't feel like, wow, I'm making a huge difference. It's only when you look back over a significant period of time, because you're moving a ship. You're not moving a little dinghy, right? You're moving a massive, tank. And that takes time and it takes a lot of patience. But there is some fun in there. I mean, I like it because you do make change on a very, very big scale.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling. Thank you, Jen, for that monologue. Really great to get to sort of trace that emotional journey. And of course, we haven't even touched on time zone. I want to talk about that, but that's not a triviality, because you're ended up working all hours, and it's not like you're working every hour. That's not the case, but you have to be awake when usually you're not, and that comes at a big price. You've got to kind of get your life almost around that time frame, which is a big compromise. So even though the global is a high status sort of position to be in, it comes at a big trade-off. So something to be aware of. And the concept that you mentioned, it takes such a long time to move the ship. Again, it comes down to sort of where motivations are. Some people have a more haptic sort of vibe to it. They want to see quick results, quick action. It may just not be that sort of rhythm when you're working at a huge scale company. I guess tolerance for it is a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit about the politics and the internal managing around and the relationship building and stuff like this. We've only got a minute to go, so I wondered whether we could all go a quick whip round to say, what's your sort of quickest tip as to how to be an effective influencer, getting people that you don't manage and you don't sort of have authority over to actually do the things that you want. I think that's the definition of influence, isn't it? If you can order people around if you've got a higher and higher responsibility. That's not influence. Influence is when you've got to persuade someone who you don't have authority over to actually behave in a change behavior. How do you do that? What's your technique? Harpreet, let's go to you first on that.
I think I would be the global TA head for Adobe if I had cracked that code. So yet to get there, but I think influencing is sort of very person specific as well, right? I think understanding and acknowledging, right, like what's in it for the other person as well, like why is this important, what's in it for you as well. I think trying to get early on the ask and sort of setting the stage correctly, honestly, and with genuinity, I have seen that works the most, right? I think being transparent really sort of helps in influencing as well. Of course, at the professional side, carry data with you, carry facts with you. Be prepared. Know your topic, know your subject really well, right? But also be vulnerable. I was wanting to say this to your earlier question, Hang. When you're taking on a global role, you should be prepared to be surprised every day. You will know so much. You will not know so much more than you know. So you should be absolutely human around it and accept it and learn from it, right? And I think with influencing also, you need to get people to your side by acknowledging the fact of the matter. Why do you need their support? What's in it for them, or what's in it for the company as well? Calling out the risks up front, I think also really helps. And those are some things that I've tried whenever working on a global project. I think the moment you can tell somebody that you need them, I think you put them on a little bit of an elevated level, and mostly people sign up for that, right? Every human likes to be given credit for, or likes to be validated with great work. And I think if you can give a little bit of that at a very human level, Adobe or not, it really works.
Yeah, really good. Loads of things that were interesting there. The sense that, you can't know everything, but you might feel pressured to say you know everything. Of course you can't. And, understanding the people who, the motivations of the people that you're trying to influence, absolutely critical. Thank you, Harpreet. Sandy, your view, how you do the influencing bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So start with listening. Understand the business and the markets, become that business partner, become commercially acute, right? Understand what you're delivering against, team dynamics before you're trying to overhaul everything together. Build that credibility. And I'll say this, it's definitely been the biggest learning of my career trajectory has been about collaboration with other business teams and functions. We all have the same goals, so build that credibility and partnerships, whether it's global or local, and don't chase perfection. I mean, we've said it a few times. Chase progress, small steps, especially when it's something new. It could be a startup, it could be reorganization. I think that's just really important thing to be aware of, is we can't fix everything at once, but understanding how you communicate that to the business as well and prioritizing that. And lastly, I guess, never underestimate the power of visibility and relationships across the borders. I think that's definitely been something very powerful that I've learned a lot from. So yeah, bring humility, adaptability and humor, and enjoy it.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, loads of advice, particularly on the visibility aspect, like credibility building, influencing. A great deal of that is actually also getting people to know who you are and what the heck you do and what you stand for. And that's a bit of internal marketing, right? You got to do some internal marketing about, and by the way, internal marketing can sometimes be external marketing as well. But it's about profile raising. It's not just about getting your head down. That's not the role. Okay, Jen, let's leave it with you. I think you talked already about influencing, but give us like a very small micro influencing tip. Like how do you convert someone who's a hard nail? There's going to be people that are just like intransigent. How do you move those folks?
Yeah, well, I have a master's degree in counseling psychology, which does help. But I think you've got to change your style and way for each person. What's really helped me is I don't care if they're the CEO, everybody has somebody they report into, right? Everybody has their concerns, what they're stressed about. The CEO has the board, or they've got their, everybody has something. So try to understand what their ego needs are, right? What's most critical to them? How do they like to show up? How can you make them look good, right? And what's going to be the levers that you need to pull that will make them sit up and listen, right? But then beyond that, it's everything that Sandy said. It's socialization, visualization, bringing them on the journey. Honestly, being able to create decks that are short, sweet, but able to visualize and absolutely tell a story is an art. And it's taken me years to get there. And I feel like I'm finally gotten there. But it does so much in terms of influencing to back yourself up. And I'll never go to a meeting without a 1-pager or 2 pages or something to fall back on to bring up.
Yeah, to have some tooling to help you communicate, a visual prop is really, really important. I've learned that myself doing Brainfood. Like, typically it's just two sort of us on camera, but having something on screen is probably something I need to start bringing in a bit more into play. All right, listen, we're out of time. We could continue talking forever on this topic. Such an interesting one to keep tracking into. Friends, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck on your magnificent careers, by the way. You've left me so far behind. It's a little bit embarrassing. I've never even had a regional role. Now, regional meaning like within a business. It says like, that's right. So, by the way, don't put me into management. That's a bad idea. Okay. Thank you, Harpreet. Wonderful to see you. I know it's super late for you, so thank you for joining us at a late time over in India. Sandy, great to see you. We'll hopefully catch up soon, my dear. Jen, thanks for soldiering on and cracking through the tech to get to on screen finally as well. Great to get your input as ever.
Patience.
Hopefully I'll see you soon as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll say goodbye to these ladies here. Adam, I think you've got to shoot, haven't you? You've got to do some paddle or something. So I guess it's time to say goodbye, I believe. Let's see.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yes, Adam,
Okay.
see you later,
Bye.
mate. Bye. All right, that's it, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll be back as ever. Brainfood Live just never stops. It's absolutely relentless. Next week, we've got a super important show for you. It is expanding scope. TA needs to do more than just TA. Because guess what? Talent acquisition is all about expanding external headcount. It's all about caring only about the payroll. It could well be that is already at peak. Companies may no longer be on that onward growth period. We might actually be permanently shrinking the size of permanent headcount as companies get more efficient with technology and AI. At which point, what we in TA have got to do is really expand scope into different areas of business enablement. How do we become the function that helps a business achieve its objectives? Sometimes that might be hiring permanent headcount. Sometimes it might be hiring a non-permanent head. Sometimes it may be hiring nobody at all or deploying some other solution. That's what we're going to be talking about next week, folks. We're going to be speaking with a bunch of recruiters who've actually gone and done that. And in fact, we've got none other than Johnny Campbell, the legendary Johnny Campbell, CEO of Social Talent, joining us for this. He's going to help basically lay the land in terms of, okay, here's how recruiters go from, or professionals go from just a narrow TA scope to something much bigger and hopefully more future fit. Make sure you sign up for that, folks. The show is up and running. We'll be back same time next week. We'll see you then.